Folks, as soon as we get a quorum, we'll get started. Thanks everyone for being here. Okay, I've detected a quorum now, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I appreciate everyone being here for what is hoping to be the last calendar for the Civil Justice Subcommittee for this year. So, Ms. Farmer Pete, go ahead and take the roll, please.
Representative Carter, Clemens, Curcio,
Here.
Garrett, Griffey, Ogles, Parkinson, Ramsey, Chairman Farmer.
Present.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. And folks, I've got just a few things I want to go through before we get started with regards to the calendar. So item 3 that's been taken off notice, been requested to be taken off notice per the sponsor. That's House Bill 1018 by Chairman Hawford, without objection. Taken off notice. Moving on down to item 8, that is House Bill 409 by Chairman Lafferty. And this is to be without objection, we're going to roll this to the special calendar. Any objections? Seeing none. Item 10, that's House Bill 1269 by Representative Rutter. That's asked to be taken off notice by the sponsor. Any objections? Seeing none. Off notice. Item 13 by Representative Potts, that's House Bill 1023. Without objection, that's going to be rolled to the special calendar. Seeing none. Moving on down to item 16 by Representative Warner, that's House Bill 446. That's been asked to be taken off notice by the sponsor. Any objection? Seeing none. Off notice. And that's all the announcements I have for now. I take that back. Item 11, House Bill 618. I missed that one. I apologize. Item 11, House Bill 618, also by Representative Rutter. That's asked to be taken off notice by the sponsor. Any objections? Seeing none. Off notice. And then backing up to, I had announced that item 16, House Bill 446 by Representative Warner was going to be taken off notice. That was actually item 17. House Bill 1376 is to be taken off notice. Any objection? Seeing none. So House Bill 1376 off notice, 446 is on notice. So we'll be heard today. All right, with that said, folks, I'm going to take out of order Representative Russell. Item 12, House Bill 697. Motion. I've got a motion, second. You're probably recognized, sir, and I don't see, well, you want to move forward with, which amendment would you like to move forward with, or both?
Chairman, if we could do Amendment 6614, that would be great.
All right, members have the motion, second? Motion. Second. All right, you're probably recognized on the amendment.
What bill are we on, Mr. Chairman?
We're item 12, House Bill 697, by Representative Russell. We're properly on the bill and amendment, what, 06614?
6614, yes, sir.
6614.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee, as amended, the amendment makes the bill, House Bill 697, withdraws certain 501c4s into the Governmental Tort Liability Act if they provide functions and services traditionally provided by municipalities. 501c4s would need to meet the following criteria to be eligible under this bill. They must maintain more than 100 miles of road, own and operate a water or sewer distribution service, appropriate funds to support a nonprofit volunteer fire department or appropriate funds to support a police department, manage trash pickup services, and fund, operate, and maintain at least one park, recreational facility, walking trail, and dog park, and also be designated as a census-designated place as of 2010 census. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I renew my motion.
And Representative Russell, I know you've worked on the amendment to try to clean some things up here. Is that what the amendment had done?
It does, and basically it just says it has to be designated as a census-designated place as of 2010 census report.
Okay, did that help tighten things up with the bill?
It did.
Okay, members, do we have any questions on the amendment? Representative Griffey, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative, for bringing this legislation. My question is kind of, why do we need to do this? Why should we give special governmental tort liability to this particular location? And are we going to run the risk of other locations wanting it And so that's my question.
Okay. And we are on the amendment, and I believe that with regards to the census, including that information to be able to tighten this up to make it only apply to just a smaller amount of entities. So was that question in regards to the amendment or on the bill?
Either, Mr. Chairman. If it's appropriate to respond to it as regard to the amendment, then it's amendment. If I need to wait and save that question for the bill after we amend it, I'm happy to
that'd
do
be
that.
appropriate for the bill.
Okay, I'll withdraw that question then.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, question on the amendment. Any objection? Seeing none, all those in favor of adopting House Amendment 6614 to House Bill 697, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Ayes have it. Now we're back on the bill as amended. Representative Griffey?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Same question. Why should we do this for this particular location, and won't we run the risk of other locations wanting it down the road?
Representative Russell,
So,
you recognize.
thank you for the question. So there's 3 others across the state, one in Shelby County, and then there's 2 hospitals, and this will just save these 2 communities a little bit of money so that they can manage their infrastructure a little bit better.
Very good. Members, any additional questions? Representative Garrett, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Representative Ruff, thank you very much. I shared some initial concerns. Those concerns have been alleviated because we've worked with your folks, worked with the amendment, and worked to narrow this as much as possible because the area that this is probably most likely going to affect is everything like a city, like a county, like a government, provides governmental services, and we've made sure that someone hopefully can't come back later and provide this type of coverage for a 501c4. So I appreciate the fact that you worked with me and alleviated my concerns on exactly what Representative Griffey kind of touched on with what's going to happen next. So they would have to have all the qualities that have narrowed this language down to be able to have this type of liability coverage. So I appreciate you working with the committee and doing that and making it as narrow as possible. So I appreciate you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any additional questions or comments before we vote? Representative Clemens?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Specifically, what entity are you trying to carve out here?
So there's 2. There's Fairfield Glades in Speaker Sexton's district and Telco Village in my district.
Representative Clemens?
Thank you.
All right, members, are we ready to vote? Representative Parkinson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was going to ask the sponsor if he could read the bill again just a little slower this time. Just kidding, Mr.
Okay. All right, that was a good one. All right, members, are we ready to vote? Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, looks like you're ready to vote to send House Bill 697 as amended to Civil Justice Full Committee. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Ayes have it. Bill moves on. Thank you. Brings us back to item 1. Chairman Faison. House Bill 1252, members. Motion. You got a motion. You got a second, sir. And I know you have Mr. Brewer here to speak, so you can you talk or not.
Good morning, committee. And Mr. Chair, with your pleasure, we'll just go into recess and let him speak.
Very good. Members, any objection? Seeing none, we're going out of session. All right, sir, if you can just go ahead and stand up there, you can stand, sit, make sure the red light's on so we can hear you. And then you've got 3 minutes initially, and then unlimited time for questions and comments. So
The red light.
the red light, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Will Brewer, legal counsel and lobbyist for Tennessee Right to Life. This is our priority legislation for the year. This bill has 2 parts to it. The first part is a wrongful death provision. Right now in the Tennessee Code, under the criminal section, it would be considered double homicide to kill a woman and her unborn child, whether that's a shooting or some type of purposeful car incident. If you kill a woman and her unborn child, you can be charged and convicted for double homicide. However, the civil part of the code does not match the criminal part. In the civil provision of the code under the wrongful death statute, you can only sue for damages for the mother and then for the baby if the baby is past the point of viability, which in Tennessee is anywhere between 20 and 24 weeks. So what this bill seeks to do is increase that liability all the way to conception. If you kill a woman and her unborn child, you can be sued for both the woman and her child, and the child all the way to conception. The second part of this bill prohibits two types of lawsuits, wrongful birth and wrongful life, which both use the same legal argument. The only difference is that wrongful birth is brought on behalf of the parents as the plaintiffs, wrongful life is brought on behalf of the child as a plaintiff. But basically the legal argument is that if a doctor fails to discover or fails to disclose some type of special need or disability that the child has when the child is in utero and then born, and the doctor had a reasonable likelihood to have discovered this and did not disclose it to the parents. Right now in Tennessee, under the common law, the parents can sue the doctor basically using the legal argument that we would have preferred abortion if we had known about this disability, but now we have this child and we have added expenses, and so they sue the doctor for the added expenses of having a special needs child. This would prohibit those two types of lawsuits and make a strong public statement in this state that abortion is never preferable to life, even when that life comes with special needs. Let me be clear, and it's been a concern among members of this committee, it does not prevent garden variety medical malpractice claims. If the doctor commits medical malpractice, it does not prevent those types of claims. It only prevents using the legal argument that abortion would have been preferable to life. So with that, I'll take any questions that the committee has. Thank you.
Members, questions? Comments? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let's go back in session without objection. Back in session. Chairman Faison.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. I want to bring up the fact that obviously I know on the Hill, if Planned Parenthood is supporting something, typically Republicans are against it. If Tennessee Right to Life is supporting something, typically Democrats are against it. Let's just accept that as it is, and we understand that's politics and that's how it works. One of the reasons I took this bill, though, is all of us in Tennessee, everybody, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, when a child is here, we respect and love that child. The important thing that this bill does, and the reason I think it's important for us to do in Tennessee, and unfortunately this has happened, is a parent with a living child can use that child and say, you know what, doctor, you should have caught that my child had this defect or my child had something going on, and I would have aborted this child had you caught this. And that's part of the lawsuit. What this bill does is says simply, you're not going to use that as a bargaining chip. Every other thing that goes on, you can sue for anything else. You can't just say that this child right here, I should have aborted because you didn't catch something, now I'm suing you. That's really all we're doing. And I think that's just human nature to realize you don't use your child that you think should have been aborted, or I've got this huge burden in my life because you didn't catch this. And so therefore I want you to pay me because you didn't catch this. And I have to use my child. Any other reason you can sue, but just saying for the sake I should have or I could have had an abortion had I known this. That's all this bill is doing.
All right, very good. Members, any questions? I believe Representative Parkinson, did you have a question? And I'll come to you, Representative Griffey, next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Chair, I don't have a question, but I got more of a comment. And I just want to correct the sponsor, who I respect, and, you know, that's my guy. But every bill everything that Right to Life supports is not necessarily something that Democrats are against. So let's correct that and make sure that we understand that and get it on the record, because there's a false narrative out there that all Democrats, you know, are against life, and that's absolutely untrue. Everything that Planned Parenthood supports, all Democrats don't support. And I'm being a little passionate about this because I hate that narrative out there, you know, and that's not the case. That's absolutely not the case. I want to be on the record of telling you this too, and all of my colleagues across the aisle. You know, I don't know many Democrats or many people, period, whether they're Democrat or Republican, that's necessarily in favor of abortion. But I know thousands that are in favor of letting that woman decide. And so let's make sure we clear that up, okay? And you know, every person that I know loves and supports a mother who is who is pregnant and bringing forth a life, and would support that woman in that space. And the problem is, the challenge is this: none of us men up here have been through the childbearing process. And I guarantee you, most of us would probably wimp out and pass out if we had to bring forth a child out of our bodies. And so we need to respect that. And let's please not spread these false narratives about Democrats or Republicans, because even there are Republicans that support some of the things that Planned Parenthood does, and especially when it comes to women's health. Maybe not necessarily the abortions, but other things that keep women healthy. So it's not black and white, and it's not one side or the other. It's all gray matter and gray space. So I just want to make sure we're clear on that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Chairman Payson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And to my friend from Shelby County, I meant to say, and I'll have to go back and look, but I meant to say typically this is where the Republicans and Democrats draw lines, and I no way meant to impugn the Democrats or Republicans as a whole. I'm just saying typically this is where our political lines fall. But yes, I have definitely known pro-choice Republicans, and I've known pro-life Democrats. And that's the beauty of the way our government system works, is that you speak for your people as a whole. And thank you for sharing that. Noted.
Representative Griffey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to make a comment and thank the chairman, the sponsor for this legislation, the Tennessee Right to Life, and my good friend from Shelby County. I think if what we've all learned with the miracles of science, we've learned of the miracle of life that starts at inception and doesn't always end up in a baby, but it is the miracle of life. And recognizing that, I think this is important legislation. So thank you for bringing it. I'm going to support it. Thank you.
Very good. Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I, too, join my colleague in stating and correcting the sponsor. You said you've known some pro-life Democrats. Everybody here is pro-life. Every single one of us is pro-life. And this false narrative that keeps getting continued, that the one's for life and one's against it, let's just set that to the side. Now, my question on the bill is, you describe these lawsuits where parents are upset but for some claim against the doctor, they would have chosen an abortion. How many of those lawsuits are there a year?
Chairman Payson.
I have not studied that. I know it has happened, and that's what we're doing.
Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So that leads to my question here. What is the real aim of the legislation? These cases, while they may exist, are rare. And so that leads my concerns to what is the real intent behind the bill. And then for the purpose of the bill and the language within the bill is the definition of person and the definition of conception at the point of fertilization and codifying that. That seems to be the real intent behind the bill, and there's a use by the special interest group from whom we heard this morning to codify this. While I appreciate your purpose, your aim, and your intention in this legislation, I think there is a other motive behind the legislation, not by you, by some who may have provided you the legislation. So that's my concern with the legislation. I appreciate it, and I would like for us to work together to end this false narrative of who's pro-life and who isn't, because we are all pro-life and we should be pro-constitutional rights as well. Thank you.
Chairman Payson, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And the gentleman from Davidson County, I would agree that it's wrong for us to falsely attack each other. Maybe the words would be more pro-choice. The opposite of that is typically historically been pro-life, but I hear you loud and clear. And furthermore, you brought up the fact about the wrongful death, and 100% agree with that in my opening statements. I didn't bring that up. But the reason this is part of it, and the reason why I think this is important, is this puts into the criminal code, not just the civil code, a wrongful death of a child that a mother is bearing. And why do I think that is important? And right now it's post 20 weeks after viability, but I would say it's important because how about the mom or the dad who've been on fertility drugs, who tried and tried and tried for years, and they finally get pregnant? And what if somebody snuffs out that life? Does justice not extend to that, both the life of the mom and the dad at 5 weeks? I mean, why does justice have something that you've worked for and tried for so long, and you finally got, and you're excited, and once you get to 16 weeks, it's still not viability according to what we have on the law, but you know if you're having a little boy or you're having a little girl. This is an incredible time, and I would say justice should come before that too, because that's the true life of that mom and dad, and they're very excited about it.
Very good. Members, any additional comments or questions for the sponsor before we vote? Seeing none. Excuse me? Okay, question's been called. All those in favor of sending House Bill 1252 along to Civil Justice Full Committee, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Ayes have it. Bill moves on.
Thank you.
Thank you. Brings us to item number 2. Chairman Kiesling, House Bill 187. You've got a motion and a second, sir, and you're properly recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. House Bill 187, actually the summary on your physical note on this one is spot on. It specifies that a local government entity is immune from liability for any cause of action or claim for damages arising out of a person's participation in a private, appropriately licensed substance abuse treatment program approved by the court as an alternative facility. Mr. Chairman and members, this was actually brought to me by, many of you all know him. He's, during his years of service, serving the 13th Judicial District, General Randy York was the one that actually brought this to me. Following his service, he formed Temperance Academy there in Crossville, and they have this facility that is just what I've described. It is a licensed facility. So anyway, the city of Crossville, County of Cumberland, they haven't approached him about this, but he just wanted me to bring this to you for consideration. And I apologize. I did ask General York if he could possibly be here, but of course he's still practicing law, so he got tied up in court today, so he couldn't be with us. But anyway, I'll try to answer any questions, Mr. Chairman, that might come my way. But with that, I'll renew the motion here.
Members, any questions or comments for Chairman Kiesling? All right, looks like we're ready to vote to send House Bill 187 to Civil Justice Full Committee. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Ayes have it. Bill moves on.
Thank you all very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. See, and item 3 has been taken off notice. That was House Bill 1018 by Chairman Hawford. That brings us down to item 4, House Bill 1200 by Chairman Hawk. You've got a motion and a second, sir. And it looks like you have an amendment here, 5388. Would you like to move forward with that?
I would like to move forward with that, Chairman and members.
And you've got a motion and a second on it as well. So,
thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. In order to assist the conversation about justice reform, we must first have a workable system of data sharing. This bill attempts to get us there. The amendment requires that the AOC to submit court clerks that don't use the TNCIS, TNCIS, with a list of the data required to be submitted to TNCIS. The AOC and court clerks must coordinate to ensure all data is submitted by January 1 of 2022 and regularly thereafter. In a nutshell, ladies and gentlemen, we're simply asking that the AOC and the clerks work together to get the data into TNCIS so we can have a better idea of what we need to do for justice reform. Simple sharing of information, and it is within the budget to be handled.
okay. Is that what the amendment does? That rewrite the bill?
It does, and forgive me. There was a prior mandate that had some cost to it in the initial bill.
Okay.
The amendment removes the fiscal impact. So yes, sir.
Okay, very good. Members, do we have any questions on the amendment? Seeing none, looks like we're ready to vote to add House Amendment 5388 to House Bill 1200. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. All right, now we're back on the bill as amended. Any questions on the bill as amended? Representative Griffey, you recognize?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative, for bringing this bill. I fully support your effort on this. We all need to be on the same page. I'm just kind of wondering, why did it end up with this big physical note on the local expenditures? Was that for these various counties that don't use
There was
the-
some pushback. The additional language, there was some pushback and a perception of cost to them, although we can all talk about fiscal notes, but there was a perception of cost and time and energy and effort to get that done. I think the amendment alleviates those concerns and even the potential pushback that we had, Chairman and members.
Very good. Representative Griffey, you recognize?
Despite, I support this effort, I'm going to support this bill. I think it's smart we do this, so thank you.
Thank you.
All right, any additional comments or questions before we vote? Seeing none, looks like we're ready to vote. Send House Bill 1200 as amended to Civil Justice Full Committee. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Ayes have it. Bill moves on.
Thank you, Chairman and members.
Thank you. Brings us down to item number 5. Shirley Lynn, House Bill 1219. Haven't seen her, so we'll roll her to the hill of today's calendar without objection. Moving down, item 6, House Bill 1161 by Representative Stewart. You got a motion and a second. You're properly recognized.
Thank you. This bill requires background checks in virtually every instance, and specifically between private sellers. And you know, some of you may know, right now in the state of Tennessee, and other states, you know, if one of us wants to right now, we could pull out our phone and purchase an assault rifle or a handgun, revolver, automatic, whatever, and probably have that in our hand in 30 minutes with a payment of cash. This would impose background check on that transaction, require you to go to a licensed gun dealer and get a background check. Right now, as many of you know, those of you who are gun owners who have bought a gun in a store like Freedman's or another sporting goods store, you get a federal background check when you do that. That's been the law for many, many years. I don't think private gun owners are significantly hampered by that. I make it very clear what the bill does, though, because I know this is an area of controversy. In my view, where we should be headed in this country, a country that's always had a strong it has a Second Amendment, has a strong tradition of gun ownership from before the Revolutionary War, is a country in which it's very easy for law-abiding citizens to obtain firearms because that's part of the right of citizenship as Americans. But where we have a system that really does allow us to address people who are mentally ill, to make sure that felons actually can't get guns, as opposed to just talking about it. And until we have a background check requirement that's universal, that's just not going to happen. Laws don't work if there's an easy end run around the law. Right now in our system, as you know, what we have is a system where if you own a gun store, you have to take a background check on all your customers. But if you sell online through Arms List, you don't. So that's what this bill does, and I would urge the committee to pass it.
Very good. Members, I do have Elizabeth Stroker with the Department of Safety on the list to speak, but does anyone have any questions or comments for Representative Stewart before we go to the session and hear from her? Okay, very good. Without objection, we're going to go out of session. Ms. Stroker.
Elizabeth Stroker, Legislative Director for the Department of Safety, and our concerns are maybe minor compared to the grand scheme of the intent of the bill. There's a requirement in the bill that anyone who inherits a handgun report that information to our department. And we're not really sure what we're supposed to do with the information or if we're even supposed to do anything with the information. And so and we also have other pieces in our code that prohibit us from collecting kind of like a firearm registry when it comes to handgun permitting. Specifically in our code, we cannot collect information of firearms used by individuals when it comes to either the permitting process or whatever else that may entail. And so we would just like some clarification on the intent of giving that information to us and what we're actually supposed to do with it, and if it would be inconsistent with the current law that we cannot collect firearm, like serial number registry information.
Very good. Members, any questions for Ms. Stroker? Any comments? Representative Clemens, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ms. Stroker. I understand this bill would increase state revenue over $4 million. I assume the Department of Safety could use those funds, at least in part, to productively use the information collected or figure out how to use the information collected to increase public safety?
Ms. Stroker?
I don't know because, and again, it's just that the bill doesn't specify what we're supposed to do with this information. And so we just don't have any guidance. People are going to report this to us and there's nothing telling us what to do with it or where we're supposed to keep it or really anything. And so really we would just like some guidance on what you would want us to use that information for, because it's just not included. It simply requires somebody just call us and let us know they inherited a handgun.
Representative Clemens?
That's it, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, let's go back into session without objection. Back in session. Members have any questions or comments? We're ready to vote. Representative Griffey, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank the sponsor for bringing this legislation to our attention for consideration. Unfortunately, I can't support it. I fully recognize your intent and concern to try to keep the hands out of firearms out of the hands of folks that shouldn't have them. Against that concern, we've also got Second Amendment concerns that citizens retain certain rights that they give to the government, and they protected their right to possess and carry firearms in my view. We just passed legislation that would enhance penalties on individuals, felons, and people that commit crimes with firearms. And rather than imposing a governmental burden on law-abiding citizens, I think in my view, the more appropriate way to address this is to punish those that obtain and use firearms in violation of law. So I can't support the legislation on that basis, but thank you for bringing it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And just a comment on that. Thank you for your comments.
Well, actually, excuse me. Let's rephrase that. Representative Stewart, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your comments. Yeah, you know, I think I hear you. Maybe as a body, Democrats and Republicans and across the United States, we need to start. I would just say, because you're a serious person, you're thinking about this carefully. I think the United States, I think serious people can get together, maybe step outside the gun debate that we have today, and address these problems like a lot of problems where we maybe set some ideology aside. And I would just say, I'm hopeful that over time we can get to a place in this state, maybe thinking outside the box, thinking outside the lines that we have, where we can take more aggressive steps, not only to punish people who use weapons in crimes, because that's important, but of course at that point people have made so many bad decisions. By the time they get to the store with the gun, so many bad things have happened, it's kind of too late for society to do much about that. I'd like to think we can move through the debate and find ways to keep guns out of the hands of people that don't need them, but at the same time assuring our citizens that their Second Amendment rights will be preserved. I'm not saying I have the perfect solution. This was one effort that I've made to do that.
Okay, very good. Any follow-up? Representative Clemens, you're recognized.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Stewart, can you elaborate what type of firearms are allowed to be sold in this manner?
Representative Stewart.
Pretty much any weapon that a person can lawfully own. I mean, you know, as you know, I've purchased an AK model. It wasn't an AK-47. It was an AK framed kind of knockoff in the McDonald's down in Metro Center on 30 minutes notice. So I mean, you can arm yourself essentially as I was armed when I was a soldier in the United States Army in about an hour in downtown Nashville if you have some cash. I mean, that's just a fact. And again, if you're a law-abiding citizen, that's your right. People are allowed to own those guns. But if you're a felon, it's not your right. But you can do it anytime you want, as the law currently stands.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Very good. Members, have any questions or comments before you vote? Seeing none, looks like you're ready to vote to send House Bill 1161 to Civil Justice Full Committee. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. No. Bill fails. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
Brings us to item 7 by Chairlady Weaver. House Bill 1542. And you're properly recognized, ma'am.
So, House Bill 1542 says eminent domain shall not be used to acquire private property for trails, paths, greenways, or other ways for walking, running, biking, or cycling, or equestrian, unless parallel to running directly alongside the length of the right-of-way and extending in the same direction as a highway, road, or street. One of your most prized possessions and things that all of us obtain this side of the Jordan is to own our own home and our own property and to enjoy life with our family and our grandkids in those places. And I'm here today to speak for 1.5 miles of property owners in Sumner County who have little small farm acreage where they might have a horse, where they might have some cows. There's a stream that goes along behind the back of their property for 1.5 miles. Sumner County is exponentially growing, and we're getting a lot of development. And I'm not here to stop development. What I am here is to be a voice for the citizens of Sumner County. So the goal of this legislation, what this bill does not do, this bill does not in any way stop, restrict, curb, or slow down growth. This bill does not in any way prohibit greenways on private property with consent. Nor does it prohibit planned use developments, homeowners associations, businesses, governments, schools, etc., from having any of the above when consent is given. And this bill does not in any way stop or prohibit the condemnation of any land for public utilities or infrastructure such as sewer, water, electric, streets, road, highways, etc. on private property. At the end of the day, the goal of this bill is to end egregious abuses of eminent domain in order to provide taxpayer-financed amenities for new development at the detriment of private landowners and against their wishes. I have a folder here of over 45 emails from people where this greenway are going to affect. One says, the job of our local government is to serve its constituents, and I feel this plan is quite the opposite. I still believe there are and were other options that would have been more cost-efficient for taxpayers, as did many others, and our concerns were ignored. Signed by Celia. I'll read one more to you, and I have a bunch of them. Hello, as a homeowner and concerned citizen of this county, I am writing to beg you to stop the theft of private land from citizens for the gain of a few at the expense of the taxpayers. I could go on and on and on. I want to make a note that homeowners are still liable for property taxes for the land under the greenway. Property owners are liable for any injuries sustained off that greenway on their land. Property owners need permission to move heavy machinery over the greenway to the other parts of their land, like the stream. Some of these people have cows. And approximately 9 property owners in a 1.5 miles have a stretch with pristine family farmland, which will be negatively affected. The greenway already exists, running alongside the state highway of 174, which is Long Hollow Pike, near these properties. And also, just a P.S., Idaho passed this exact same bill. I believe it's an abuse of powers. I believe that it's nothing short of inside trading for people who know where development is going, and at the expense of a property owner, they put money in their pocketbook. And I think it's wrong, and I think we need to address it. And so there you have it.
And thank you for that. And I just had a quick question. Now, who's put this measure forth? Is it the city council or the county
It's the
commission?
county commissioner.
Okay. Sounds like this is a local issue to me.
It is, but it's about eminent domain as well. I mean, I really think that we need to be mindful of this, especially Tennessee is growing like crazy. And guys, we were sent down here to represent our folks. And when this stuff comes into my email and comes to me, it's my job. I work for them. It's my job to bring their voice to the state. It needs to be addressed.
And I think there's, you know, and if members, if you all have any questions, I think there's levels of representation that we have. I think you kind of move forward through your city council, and you kind of move up through your county government, and you kind of move up to your state government. And I think that if an issue can be remedied at a lower level of government, I won't say lower, but just a different tier. I kind of see it as a tier kind of working its way up, right? So I think that this is something that, to me, needs to be handled by the constituents, the folks that vote and put those folks in those local positions, those county commissioners that are pushing this measure forward. If this has what you say it has, and I guess the adverse reaction or some things that's going on locally there, I think that this is something that should be taken up with those county commissioners, frankly. And I hate to step in as we always say, look, we want the locals to have the control. We don't want to come in and tell locals what to do. So, but you recognize that.
And I do appreciate those comments, Chairman Farmer. And I am not here to bulldoze over the locals, because you're right, they were definitely put in place and voted by the locals. But we go to the federal government in a lot of ways as a state, to discuss or debate issues that maybe an executive branch is out of line. We still push back. And so those people, those landowners, are coming to us. And I think it's just a natural way of going one step up to make to allow their voices to be heard. And that's what a republic is. We can't ignore the ones that sent us here. And that's what I intend to do.
Thank you, and I respect that tremendously.
Thank you.
Members, Representative Clemens.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with the chairman. I think this is a hyper-local issue, and while I appreciate the argument against eminent domain, the amount of exclusions in this bill, and specifically targeting trails, passing greenways for walking or otherwise, just emphasizes how hyper-local of an issue we're trying to address here. It's like a sledgehammer to kill a fly situation. So with that, I understand your concerns and valid concerns, but I do, again, believe this to be a truly local issue that should be addressed at the local issue. And also, local governments are going to disagree from one area to another. I know my area, the area I represent, we love our greenways and we love our paths. And so, the same umbrella policy shouldn't apply across the board. And I hope this would be addressed at the local level. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Members, any questions, comments? Chairman Curcio, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate the spirit of the bill, certainly. But I do think we're under. This is a pretty large lift, and I know we're here kind of towards the tail end. I think this is our last committee meeting, so I'd hate to rush into anything. I would make a motion that to give us more time to kind of ruminate on this, move this to the first calendar of next year.
Okay. Is that a motion?
Yes, sir. I'd make that motion.
Very good. Proper motion. Members, any objection for us to send House Bill 1542 to the first calendar of next year? All right. That's been seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Ayes have it.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members.
Thank you so much. Brings us to item 9, House Bill 798. Representative Chisholm. Okay. All right, members, we're on item 9, House Bill 798. There's proper motion, and there's properly seconded as well. And Representative Chisholm, looks like you have an amendment traveling with this, or at least been filed 6201. And I believe you're working with some folks to help clean this legislation up, and that amendment may have done that. So 6201, would you like to move forward with that?
Yes.
Okay, good. And you've got a motion in a second. You're properly recognized.
Okay. Limits to 4 years the amount of time after completion of an improvement of a street, sidewalk, or highway that a claim may be brought against the local government to recover damages associated with injuries or wrongful death which occur as a result of deficiency in the design, planning, supervision, observation, or construction of an improvement. It affords local governments 4-year statute of repose after the substantial completion of the system. And with that, I renew my motion.
Okay, so we're on the amendment, members. So remember that. Any questions on the amendment? Representative Parkinson, you recognize?
Just a quick question. So does the amendment rewrite the bill? Is that the actual bill, the amendment now?
That may be a good question for the sponsor.
Mr. Sponsor?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sponsor.
Members? Representative Clemens?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate Representative Chisholm. This amendment, it satisfies and addresses a lot of the concerns that many had, so I appreciate you amending this legislation and working diligently on this for your local government.
Very good.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And I saw Chairman Curcio. Do you have a question?
Thank you, Chairman. I've just moved previous question on the amendment.
Very good. Previous question has been called on the amendment. Hold on one. Previous question has been called on the amendment. All those in favor of adopting House Amendment 6201 to House Bill 798, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Ayes have it. Now on the bill as amended. Well, if you could just hold. I just want to make sure we cover all our bases here and be respectful to folks. I have a Michael Fletcher on the list to speak. Is Mr. Fletcher in here? Yes. Members, would you mind if we go out of session here for Mr. Fletcher? He's traveled here to speak today, I believe from Memphis. So any objection to go out of session? Seeing none. All right, come on up here, sir. And you can stand there or sit in one of those seats, either one. There's a button there. It has a little mouth. Looks like little lines coming from it there. Just be sure it's illuminated red. Second.
Okay, I was just looking, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much, committee members.
Just introduce yourself.
My name is...
and you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
My name is Michael
time
Fletcher.
For questions and comments. Thank you.
My name is Michael Fletcher. I'm the Deputy City Attorney for the City of Memphis. The statute is fairly simple in the sense that it puts a statute of repose upon the constructions of trolleys and light rails. It puts the city in, or any city in equal footing with those who design rails, fabricate the rails, construct the rails. Those entities are all covered. Those engineers, general contractors are all covered by a statute of repose that already exists. This simply gives the city the same protection that those who have designed, fabricated, and constructed. It does not affect the 1-year statute of limitations under the Tennessee Governmental Tort Liability Act. It simply says this, and I'll give you the example. We have a trolley system in Memphis. In 2004, the Madison Avenue line was constructed. In 2005, lawsuits were brought claiming negligent design. At that point, the city was involved, MATA was involved, the engineers who designed it were involved, the engineers and company that fabricated it was involved, and those that constructed it were involved, all in that lawsuit. Then there was a gap in time, and I can't explain it, when there were no lawsuits and apparently no accidents. And then in 2015, 14, 15, we started seeing some others. Well, when the lawsuits were filed, the only people left standing because of the statute of repose afforded the engineers and the general contractors was the city of Memphis and MATA. We didn't design it. We didn't build it. We own the dirt, though. And the Governmental Tort Liability Act means that we're continue to be responsible for those things that we own and control, which are the roadways. This simply puts us in an equal position with those that would have constructed it.
Very good. Members, any questions for our speaker? And thank you for that explanation, sir. Appreciate you being here. All right, we're going to go back into session without objection. All right, Representative Chisholm? No, question's been called on the bill. Any objection? Seeing none. Members, looks like we're ready to vote. Send House Bill 798 as amended to Civil Justice Full Committee. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. Ayes have it. Very
Thank
good.
you, Chair Committee.
Thank you. That brings us down to item 14, House Joint Resolution 97 by Representative Sparks.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members.
You've got a motion? Second. And you've got a second. You're probably recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, committee members, I'll argue that this is a pretty simple resolution, pretty straightforward, but I'll argue it's the most important that we'll probably hear before this committee today. It simply recognizes the importance of the freedom of speech in the First Amendment to the United States Constitution.
You recognize. You want to let us know what it
Well,
does?
you know, I've just seen some things over the past few years, and I'm sure some other members probably have as well, that I feel the First Amendment's under attack. It's the First Amendment for a reason. I feel so adamant about this, I even went back to school and took a few journalism classes to see. And my professors have all been great. Dr. Larry Burris, he couldn't make it here today to testify, but you've probably seen Dr. Larry Burris on News Channel 5 doing commentary about the First Amendment, about the importance of free expression. But I just want to share something that he emailed me. He said, because these media forms are so pervasive, meaning the internet, and in fact limited number, they have responsibility to allow all points of view on their systems, particularly points of view that deal with issues of public policy and public welfare. It has come to the point to where social media platforms are perhaps as essential as other utilities, and with the same responsibilities. Within a limited set of restrictions, we do not allow electric companies, gas companies, or water companies, or even telephone companies to cut off your service because the utility managers do not agree with your political point of view. In general, the way you're using electricity or gas or water or other telephone services would be. He goes on to say, in his book, On Liberty, John Stuart Mill argued against suppression of speech in two major grounds. First, if the guardians of suppressed speech, they may be suppressing the truth. Even false ideas should not be suppressed because the discussion of false ideas can, in fact, help us discover that truth. That's the basic intent of this resolution. I have someone that could testify. They couldn't make it today. Next week, if y'all move this bill forward to next week.
Very good. Members, do we have any questions for Representative Sparks? Representative Clemens, you recognized? Then to you, Chairman Curcio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My concern with this, and I appreciate the intent of it, we discuss this a lot. If y'all don't know, me and Representative Sparks sit next to each other on the House floor, and I get an earful about free speech pretty much every day.
He's a pretty comical guy, by the way. He gets me laughing sometimes, and it ain't for the right reasons.
But this point in here you raise, and I know you quote the Pew Research and things like that for your data, but this last sentence here, that we seek to bring awareness to the monopoly currently enjoyed by big tech social media platforms and their infringement on the First Amendment and the right to freedom of speech. It gives me a little heartburn. I don't think there is a monopoly currently enjoyed by what you define as big tech social media. I'd suspect everybody in here who has a TV in their office has a different news station on television right now, none of which are big tech social. That by definition means there's not a monopoly for the most part. In fact, there's dozens of news stations on TV that are not big tech as you define it in here. So that's my concern with this. And the just flat out claim that they are infringing on First Amendment, they very well may be in somebody's estimation or some attorney's opinion or even some court case. But I don't think it's fair to classify them all on that and make a de facto statement like that in a resolution passed by this body. So those are my points of objection. I appreciate the legislation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, and thank you for those questions. Any response?
Well, ironically, that's what I'm looking for is more freedom of speech to discuss this in the next full committee, and I have someone that'll come up and speak on that. I don't think we need to suppress speech. If anything, we need more of it. And I'll argue there's not enough discussion. I served at the local level. We're talking about local issues, and I won't use the term I want to use, but I've seen leaders and people just serve for years and never have a word to say, never do anything. And it just amazed me. And it's not just big tech. I mean, y'all have heard me say, senior members have been up here for a few years, of a poor African-American church that was shut down by government, local government, for 2 years. I had to beg a journalist, Fox 17, Michaela Lewis did a story. Go to YouTube, type in Word of Life, Laverne. And it's a sad situation. They were out of pocket $56,000, and they had no voice. No one stepped up for them. And when you see that, and that's my community, that's just a few miles down the road. The church, sadly, is shut down. They were out $56,000 because they could not worship in their own facility. And let me just read, if I could, Chairman, let me just read the First Amendment. Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion, prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. I've personally seen those restrictions in my community. I represent those folks. Sadly, many people today are afraid to speak up. That pastor, I wanted him to write an op-ed. He said, "No, Brother Sparks, I'm retiring." He just didn't want to create any controversy. I'm like, this shouldn't be controversial. It's the First Amendment. Ironically, we should talk about it, not be in fear of speaking our political views. But I do have someone that's more of an expert witness that can testify next week if y'all move this forward.
And thank you for that. And I think this is the first time I've ever had a member use the First Amendment as a means to move their bill forward.
Yes.
So that was clever.
Let's just hope it works, sir.
You know? Chairman Curcio, you recognized?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, sponsor. This is relevant to the bill, or the resolution. I spent Easter we've got our first kind of big family gathering together this past weekend we've had in a year, and so I was around a lot of my younger nieces and nephews who are school-aged and some of them in college now. And I was curious. I kind of did a little informal poll. I asked them, if they were on what their favorite social media platform was, and they all looked at me like I was 1,000 years old. Mm-hmm. Because they were like, social media is completely irrelevant. Mm-hmm. And in fact, one of them said, there's this boomer mania about social media. They said it's gonna be gone because a lot of us who didn't grow up with this stuff and it landed on our phones later in life or after we graduated from college, unfortunately, have spending too much time in our basements worrying about what people are saying on here. And thank God the people coming behind us are smarter than that. And so I actually think that when we pass things like this, it elevates social media platforms to a place that is just completely inappropriate. They're not a public forum. The courthouse steps are a public forum. Legislative Plaza is a public forum. Facebook's annoying. It's silly. And I just think we're doing with resolutions like this or bills like this that talk about Facebook being a public square or Twitter being a public square, we're actually giving agency to the very people that you're trying to address here. So I really appreciate the spirit in which you bring this, but I didn't support a bill last year that did something similar. This is a resolution. I just think we're giving way too much agency and power to folks who in a couple of years aren't going to matter anymore. And I would encourage folks to just get off of Twitter and start talking to each other. I think that's really what's going to solve most of this. And then you did read from the First Amendment, which I mean, I'll be the first amen corner over here hearing from the First Amendment. But talks about Congress shall. I think a lot of people skip over that when they talk about First Amendment rights when it comes to social media. You know, Facebook's a private company. They can decide who uses their platform and who doesn't in the same way that I can decide who walks into my place of business and who doesn't. I can refuse service to people. So while I agree that the First Amendment is sacred, Congress isn't doing anything at Facebook. Mark Zuckerberg's not a member of Congress. He owns a company. And so I think stuff like this just really just gives them too much power. We're focusing on the wrong things, I think. So with that, I'd like to move this resolution to summer study.
Proper motion. Any objection? Seeing none, all those in favor of sending House Joint Resolution 97 to summer study, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. No. Ayes have it.
Chairman, if I could, just want to remind, because this issue is not going away. I'll be back up here next year, but 90% of the media is controlled by 5 companies. That's not a monopoly, that's an oligopoly. This is serious. I've been suppressed on Facebook. Many of you will be suppressed. And I like what Voltaire said. He said, I may disagree with what you have to say, but I'll give my life to defend your right to say it. So thank you, and I'll see you this summer. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Brings us to item 15, House Bill 1254 by Vice Chair Sexton. And you're properly recognized, sir. And I do have several people on the list to speak on this bill. I have Elizabeth Stroker, Maggie Duncan, and then Mr. Grant Henry, I believe, is here as well. So you've got a motion and a second, sir, and then you also have Amendment 6534 that I have. Would you like to move forward on that?
Yes, I would.
Okay. You've got a motion and a second, and you're probably recognized.
What this bill does, and this amendment makes the bill, it deals with the attorney's fees for civil asset forfeiture. Right now, they're capped at $3,000. And this bill would move it to $10,000. However, the $3,000 is not normally what an attorney would get for on the average. And I'll give you an example. The Department of Safety reports that the average amount of seized cash is $2,200. If someone wants to recover this amount of seized cash, the attorney would only be eligible for $550 in attorney's fees. The Tennessee Bar Association reports that the average hourly billing rate in Tennessee is currently $274 an hour. That $550 awarded in attorney's fees would represent only just under 2 hours, which doesn't leave much ability for the person that's trying to recover their assets in attorney's fees. So assessing the rough trade-in value of an automobile or reasonable replacement value for the miscellaneous personal property is subjective under the cap. The amount of attorney's fees that are awarded are tied to the actual expense and worked hours. So what this does is changes some of the code, and I can get into all of those percentages if you would like for me to, but I'll be glad to answer any questions.
And we're on the amendment, members. Any questions on the amendment? Representative Clements, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And there's still a requirement for the fees to be proven as reasonable and necessary. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes. They have to be proven.
But they have to be proven to be reasonable and necessary.
Reasonable and necessary is correct.
Thank you.
Very good. Members, questions been called on the amendment? Any objection? Seeing none, looks like we're ready to vote to adopt House Amendment 6534 to House Bill 1254. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Ayes have it. Now we're back on the bill as amended. Any additional comments before we go to session, sir? All right, members, any objection to go to session to hear from Ms. Strucker? All right, seeing none.
Elizabeth Stroker, Legislative Director for the Department of Safety, and thank you for Chairman Sexton working with us on this and actually with the amendment. We've deferred on it. It works for us, so thank you.
Very good. Thank you so much. Members have any questions for Ms. Stroker before she steps down? All right, thank you. Maggie Duncan, Ms. Duncan, are you around here somewhere? You may be outside. Okay. Give Ms. Duncan just a moment in case she's somewhere close by. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Oh. Okay, all right. So that she's waving us off here, so that's good. And then Representative Sexton, I guess you want Mr. Henry to testify, Grant Henry. I have a Grant Henry on the list. Sounds like. Okay. All right, members, without objection, we're going to go back into session. Seeing none. All right. Question's been called on a bill. Do I see any objection? Seeing none, looks like we're ready to vote to send House Bill 1254 as amended to Civil Justice Full Committee. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. Ayes have it. Bill moves on. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman and Committee.
Brings to item 16. Saw Representative Warner standing back there for an hour and 15 minutes. Appreciate you hanging out with us. This is House Bill 446. You've got a motion. Sir, I don't hear a second. I'll second. Okay. You've got a motion and a second on House Bill 446. I have two amendments on here. Amendment 5351 and then House Amendment 5790. Would you like to move forward with either of those?
Just amendment number 2, 5790.
Okay, members, can I get a motion in a second for that amendment? Very good. You're probably recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. Amendment number 2 adds that a violation of this section by the state or local government entity may be reviewed by the Office of Attorney General and Reporter and the General Assembly and may result in the entity's loss of funding from the state for the fiscal year following the violation.
Very good. Members who have any questions on House Amendment 5790? Chairman Curcio, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm sorry, can you explain what's different about the amendment in the bill as filed? I'm trying to read through it here, but.
You're recognized, Mr. Warner.
What the amendment does, it gives a little teeth to an existing bill, and if a local entity or the state, if they impede upon our Second Amendment right, they would lose funding for the following year if the Attorney General or whatnot sees that they have impeded upon that right.
Chairman Curcio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And that's the part I'm looking. So I want to make sure we're on Amendment Code of 5790. Is that correct? And there's a provision. That's what I was going to ask is because I agree we need to make sure we don't do anything that violates our Constitution. So where in the bill is who determines whether or not the act violates the Constitution?
Representative Warner,
the Attorney General.
Right. Where is that in the amendment?
It's in the amendment.
Section 3.
Representative Warner, where in the amendment is it? Is in a certain section, or where does it say that?
It's reviewed by the Office of the Attorney General and Reporter, and the General Assembly may result in the loss of funding from the state.
Chairman Curcio.
Thank you very much. That answers the question. Thank you.
Okay, good deal. Any additional questions? Okay. Representative Clemens, you're recognized.
Yeah. So we've had several of these bills come through, and it's certainly not this sponsor's fault, and I doubt it was his intention, but we've had several of these bills come through that deal with the enforcement of laws that have been deemed to be unconstitutional or illegal. And I don't know exactly what they're going to do. The state surely isn't going to spend money to enforce laws that are unconstitutional or violation of a state or statute or otherwise. So I'm faced with a piece of legislation that really isn't going to do anything. And the Attorney General and Reporter's Office, they can make a determination, but of course that's one attorney's opinion. And it carries some weight, I'll grant it that, but it's one attorney's opinion. But again, it goes back to the fact that if something is unconstitutional or illegal, it's not going to be enforced anyway. And I doubt the state of Tennessee is going to spend any resources on it, Mr. Chairman. So I'd like to see this go to summer study or something, because I just don't know what it's going to do. And we've had multiple bills like this, and maybe we can discuss this issue at length and over the summer or when we're out of session to determine how best to approach what's trying to be accomplished here. Thank you.
Very good. Representative Warner, any follow-up? Okay. Members, and we are on the amendment. So we have a motion to adopt that amendment. Very good. You got a motion. All those in favor of adopting House Amendment 5790 to House Bill 446, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Ayes have it. Now we're back on the bill as amended. Any additional questions on the bill as amended? Representative Clemens, you recognize.
Yeah, procedural, Mr. Chairman. Was there a second on that motion to adopt the amendment? I didn't hear it. Okay. Thank you.
Yes, there was in a second. So, all right, members, looks like we're ready to vote to send House Bill without objection. Looks like we're ready to vote to send House Bill 446. And Representative Clemens, did you make a motion for summer study, or is that something that, I know you had said that, and I know we're on the amendment.
Well, I realize I'm a minority on this committee, and if somebody wanted to do that, I'd certainly be open to it, and I'm happy to do it if it's the will of the committee. I just, again, continue to see this, Mr. Chairman. We pass these bills that look great and say things to carry out I think the sponsor's intent, but they don't actually do anything other than what the law already allows. So with that, I'd move to summer study.
All right, it's a proper motion. Any objection, members? Okay. All right. Let's vote. All those in favor and send House Bill 446 as amended to summer study, say aye. Opposed, say no. No. Bill, or the motion fails. Now we're back on the bill. Looks like we're ready to vote whether or not to send House Bill 446 as amended to Civil Justice Full Committee. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Ayes have it. Bill moves on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. And that brings us, folks, down to item 18. That's House Bill 1472 by Representative Ogles. I'm going to be handling that for him today, but if we could do this, if we could roll that 3 spaces and 3 spaces, seeing no objection, I'm going to roll House Bill 1472, item 18, 3 spaces. And that brings us to item 19 now. That's House Bill 1072 by Chairman Curcio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee. I'd like to move amendment coded 6664.
Very good. You've got a motion and a second on the bill and a motion and a second on the amendment. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, committee. Members, this, I think, is a very important issue. As we continue to see political subdivisions, which we created, our own creation, suing the state or trying to enjoin actions of the General Assembly as a way to sort of play political football and continue to sort of create speed bumps for us. I brought forth this legislation in the spirit of trying to right what I see as a wrong, which is using our own state money to sue ourselves. So that's what this bill would seek to do. There's 2 sections here. One, that would simply say if a chancery court enjoins an action of this General Assembly, a law that we've passed, it would stay the injunction until the final appeal, so that there can be a continuity of government. Folks can continue on with the law that the General Assembly passed, and until that final appeal, whether it's the appellate level or the Supreme Court finally rules on it. And then, if the final appellate court agrees with the initial decision, then it would stop. If they disagree, then you didn't have this herky-jerky kind of start-stop situation. The next section dealing with prohibiting political subdivisions to sue the state is something for debate, but I also understand that may be somewhat controversial in this committee, and so I'd be at the will of the committee if we wanted to remove that section and just stick with the top section of the bill, but I'm at the will of the committee.
Very good. Members, Representative Griffey, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chairman Curcio, for bringing this bill. I do kind of wonder what happens if we run into a situation where a state agency is taking a position in regard to some county or municipality, some activity they're wanting to do, and the agency's relying on statutory language and it's unclear. Would this amendment that prevents the political subdivision to bring an action against a state, would that prevent them from trying to get a declaratory judgment action to try to, the county may have one position and the agency may have another. I don't want to hamper a county's ability to try to get clarification from a court or proceeding. That's the one thing that kind of jumps to my mind that gives me some pause.
Chairman Curcio, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, yes, that is the intent. Again, and maybe I didn't get to it as efficiently as I should have, and I would welcome any recommendations. But what I'm trying to prevent is the fact that we're using our own state resources to sue ourselves. And again, I realize that Section 2 is probably the most controversial section of this, and so if it's something that the committee felt comfortable wanting to move forward without Section 2, I would not be opposed to that, and then leaving the rest of the bill intact. But yes, what I'm trying to prevent is us, it'd be different if a local political subdivision wanted to use their own revenue, like if they're levying property taxes, and if they want to use their own money to sue us, that may be a different story. But to use state dollars for us to sue ourselves seems counterproductive to me.
Very good, and thank you. Representative Parkinson, I have you next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Now, normally, myself and the chairman, we are almost locked in step in most cases. This one right here is a doozy, though. Mr. Chair, and to the sponsoring chair, I want to make the motion that we remove that Section 2, and then we start a conversation about Section 1, if we will.
Very good. Proper motion. All right, and that'll be an oral amendment there, and typically we would like those to be in writing. This is our last meeting. And it's been, now it's known that, very good. Thank you for that, sir. So that's proper motion, an oral motion to make an amendment to Amendment 1 there, I guess, to remove Section 2. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Ayes have it. All right. We've adopted oral Amendment 1. Sounds good. Okay. Now we're back on the bill as amended. And Representative Parkinson, you're recognized.
We're on the...
We are on the
amendment as amended.
Yes.
Correct. Okay. And we have so few divisions, myself and Chairman Curcio, that it got dark in here. I don't know if God's trying to say something there, but so my concern now on the amendment as amended is that, if the stays, if we well, number one, I want us to be careful about handcuffing the judge, so to speak, and I'm sorry for bad analogy, or tying the hands of the judge, of a judge in these cases. And sometimes, and I just want you to think about this, Mr. Chairman, sometimes, during that appeals process, it's so much damage that can be done, in that space. And if that stay is not allowed by this legislation, it could possibly cause, in some cases, irreparable damage. And so that's a real concern for mine. Now, if there was, something in the legislation that would, create a short time frame for that appeal to be heard and it to be, walked on through, in a very short time frame, so that damage could not, happen, that would be hard for these school districts to recover from. you know, I can understand because I have a feeling that this is what this is about. The other thing is, under the amended amendment now, would those school districts be able to operate under existing law if they were utilizing their own monies?
Chairman Curcio, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your question. So I think your question is, but no, I don't want to confuse things. This would basically just say that if a judge across the state rules that the questions the constitutionality of an action of this legislative body, it would stay the injunction until the final appeal. So basically the law that we voted on in the General Assembly and was signed into law by the governor would stand until the final court said, no, it actually in fact is unconstitutional, at which point then obviously it would be null and void and we wouldn't enforce it. If in fact the final authority said, no, it's constitutional, we uphold it, then folks don't have to have this start-stop. I'll give you another, for instance. Let's say there was, I don't know if this has happened, but let's say we pass a law on how elections are supposed to be managed, and in the midst of the election you have a chancery judge who says that law is unconstitutional, and obviously it's going to be appealed and you're in the midst of an election. It would allow the law of the land, the law that we voted on and was signed into law by the governor, to continue on until that final appeal. Because you can imagine in a situation like that, you need some clarity. You need folks to be able to know how they can vote and how they can access the ballot box. Just for instance.
Yep, and just quick response. And thank you for that. And I get it. I really do get what you're trying to do. You know, and it cuts both ways. You know, so if the stay is not allowed, then and it's ruled unconstitutional at some point, then we will have infringed possibly on the rights of individuals by not allowing that stay to be in place. But if it's ruled constitutional, we could possibly be outside the law. That was an actually just law under the Constitution. It's a challenging piece for me, and so yeah. But I appreciate you. Thank you for the explanation.
Thank you. And I have Representative Griffey. You recognize?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank Chairman Curcio for bringing this. And I think this is smart legislation because if we have a dispute over a statute and a circuit court judge, a chancery court judge says, look, I'm reading it this way or that way, whatever, y'all may agree or disagree, but the state's interest ought to be protected as it goes up on appeal. And I don't, Chairman Curcio may be able to answer this, but I don't think there would be anything that would prevent either party, whether it's the state or the other litigant, from asking the Court of Appeals to lift a stay or lift an injunction in the appellate process, or if, they can always petition to the Supreme Court as well and ask them to take extraordinary review of it and then asked to lift the stay or keep the stay or injunction in place. So, but I just think I clerked for Judge Odell Horton in Memphis for a number of years, and extremely great man, and yeah, he's awesome. And but he says, look, my job at the trial level is to try to lay out what I think the law is, and then if we're talking about some big issues, that's for the judges, where they've got 3 or 4 judges sitting on a panel to decide stuff and make the ultimate decisions on things. So this is a smart approach, and I appreciate you bringing it. I'm definitely going to support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Chairman Curcio, any follow-up?
I would just say thank you, and that's exactly right, and it speaks to the spirit of that. I think many of us learn we come into the legislature. The joke in our office is if you ask 10 lawyers their opinion on your bill, you'll get 12 answers. And so if there's a chancery judge, their opinion certainly matters, but that's why we've got the appellate level, and that's why ultimately we have the Supreme Court level. So thank you, and I appreciate your support.
Representative Clemens, I have you on the list.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm glad we eliminated number 2. I just want to be clear, which amendment barcode are we working from?
It's my understanding that we are on Amendment 6664 as amended.
Okay, thank you. And so with that, I still have like my colleague down there, I have concerns about the injunction. I mean, the very purpose for an injunction is to do a specific act or refrain someone from taking an act is to preserve the status quo and protects, people from irreparable harm, and harm generally of the type for which monetary damages are inadequate. The very purpose for an injunction seems to be defeated by this section. So why even have an injunction if we're just going to stay that injunction and defeat the very purpose for injunctive relief in the case of an interlocutory appeal? That's my first question.
Chairman Curcio, you recognize?
Well, this bill doesn't contemplate the creation of an injunction. It just says that we're going to stay it until the final appeals process.
But that in and of itself defeats the very purpose for an injunction. If a trial court issues an injunction, it has found, with pretty considerable proof, I might add, several elements that are required for injunctive relief to be given of any type under Tennessee procedure before it ever gets to that point. And so now, and of course, granting it has those specific purposes for which I outlined earlier. So why are we even going to have it if we're just going to stay it?
Chairman
It's going to defeat the purpose.
Chairman Curcio, you recognize?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, thank you for the question. So that's a great question for kind of what came before this bill, but this bill would change the public policy of the state.
President Clements, you recognize?
All right. Don't seem to be getting anywhere there. So an interlocutory appeal, that doesn't have to even be granted. Are we going to create a chilling effect with permission being granted by the trial court to allow an interlocutory appeal?
Chairman Curcio, you recognize?
I don't think we'll know that until this becomes law.
Well, if a judge thinks
President Clemens, you recognize?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize. So if a trial judge thinks that their interlocutory, if a trial judge thinks that their injunction is only going to be stayed because an interlocutory appeal is taken, they may not give permission for that interlocutory appeal. That would defeat the very purpose for their power and purpose for issuing an injunction in the first place.
Chairman Curcio, you recognize for any follow-up you may have?
No, sir, I have no follow-up.
Okay. Very good. President Clements, you recognize?
I'm afraid this legislation is purely reactive to recent events, and I think it's important to note that a lot of times judges don't issue orders or issue injunctions precisely because, to use your hypothetical, an election is looming or has already taken place, and they don't think that it's practical to do so. And so I think our trial judges are using their best judgment in many instances. We have a very specific reason and a very specific burden of proof to even have an injunction issued, and now we're defeating the purpose for injunctive relief by saying it can even be stayed. And then you have on top of that interlocutory appeals, which don't even have to be granted by the very judge that issued the injunction. So I think we're creating a whole host of issues here that defeat the very purpose for a lot of these things under the rules of civil procedure and the courts of this state. And so with that, I have strong objections to the legislation. I thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for that. And next on the list, I have Representative Griffey. There will be a question on the amendment. Okay. Members, without objection, we're voting to adopt House Amendment 6664 as amended to House Bill 1072. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. Ayes have it. And now we're back on the bill as amended. Representative Parkinson, okay, we're about to run out of time for the room.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I got a question or a suggestion to the sponsor that may help to soften it a little bit or make it possibly a better bill. I don't know. I'm the only non-attorney on the committee. And so, Mr. Sponsor, would it be possible to have this kick in for expedited appeal situations? You know, when we need a quick turnaround on appeals, and this kicks in as an automatic, no stays granted until the appeals process, but under expedited situations, possibly. There may be some good middle ground.
Chairman Curcio, you're recognized for any comment or follow-up, if any.
Thank you, and I appreciate the spirit of the question. I mean, I'm very happy with the language as I filed it. So, but I do appreciate the question. Okay. So
Thank you. Thank you for the soft letdown. I appreciate it.
All right, question's been called on the bill. Any objection? Seeing none, looks like we're ready to vote to send House Bill 1072 as amended to Civil Justice Full Committee. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. Ayes have it. Bill moves on. And folks, members, I have been notified probably 10 minutes ago that we were to immediately end this meeting, but I wanted to go ahead and finish that bill, considering we had the oral amendment and everything. So with that said, all remaining bills on this calendar, as well as any bills that are on the special calendar, will be rolled to next week. So without objection, and then I'll take a motion to adjourn. Very good. We're adjourned till next week.